The glowworm. You've seen the photos of the Waitomo caves in New Zealand. A ceiling that looks like a clear night sky. Everyone calls it beautiful. It's a kill floor. Every blue-green pinprick up there is a living animal, and the cave is quiet because everything caught in it died without a sound. The light isn't the trap. Hanging under each glowing larva are up to 70 silk threads, beaded end to end with sticky droplets, like fishing lines strung with glue. Insects that steer by the brightest thing above them fly straight up into it and get reeled in. Despite the name, this isn't a worm. It's the larva of a fungus gnat, and the glow doesn't come from some elegant lantern organ. Turns out it comes out of a modified excretory organ at the back end. The prettiest thing in that cave is, functionally, a lit up rear end. Every one of those lines carries dozens of sticky points, so a square yard of ceiling holds thousands of hooks, and the big grottos hold thousands of larvae lit at once. Nothing up there is hunting you. The ceiling is. Every person who's ever called that view romantic was staring straight up into a room full of open mouths. The net-casting spider. Most spiders wait for you to blunder into their web. This one hangs above the ground, holding its web open in 4 legs, aimed at the dirt you're about to walk across. The ogre-faced spider spins a small rectangular net out of stretchy silk and slams it onto whatever walks underneath. For flying prey, it does something stranger, a backward overhead strike, snatching something out of the air it never looked at. It has the largest simple eyes of any spider on Earth, and it rebuilds the light-sensitive membrane inside them every single night. That's a lot of daily upkeep for a pair of eyes. And most people assume those eyes do the work. Turns out the backward strike doesn't use them at all. The spider hears the prey. Slits and fine hairs on its legs pick up airborne sound from 2 meters out, and that alone fires the throw. The net is smaller than a postage stamp at rest. In the strike, it opens to roughly 5 times that without tearing, and the capture is over faster than you can blink. Nature looked at a spider, looked at a Roman gladiator, and went with the gladiator. It isn't a spider with a web, it's a spider holding a weapon, listening in the dark for something to use it on. The Antlion. There's a decent chance one of these is within walking distance of you right now, under a porch or against a wall, at the bottom of a hole the size of a bottle cap. The larva digs its cone by spiraling inward and flicking sand out with its head, walking backward the whole time, because backward is the only direction it has. Then it buries itself with nothing but its jaws showing. Grab, inject, drain. But the trap isn't the hole. The trap is a number. Loose sand only holds a slope so steep before it slides, and the larva digs until the walls sit right at that limit. An ant stepping on the rim starts an avalanche it can't climb out of, and sand piling up in the center gets flung back out to reset it. People have run this through the soil modeling software engineers use for real slopes. For a bug. The common version of this is wrong twice over. The sand isn't slippery, and an antlion isn't an ant. It's the larva of an insect that grows up looking like a scruffy damselfly. The larva runs ½ an inch. The pit runs 2 inches across, 4 times its own body length. Scale that to a person, and you're digging a crater 24 feet wide, by hand, in reverse. The ant doesn't fall in. The ant gets pulled in by architecture that was aimed at it before it showed up. If this is the kind of animal deep dive you want more of, I post them constantly, and subscribing really helps. Thanks. The Slingshot Spider. Everything else on this list waits. This one launches. In the Amazon, a spider barely bigger than a sesame seed builds a cone-shaped web, ties a line to the middle of it, and pulls, holding that tension in its front legs while gripping the web with its back ones. It can sit like that, fully loaded, for minutes. When a mosquito drifts close enough, it lets go, and the whole web fires forward, with the spider still riding it. Muscle has a hard ceiling on how fast it can dump energy. Silk doesn't. By loading slowly and spending it all at once, the spider stops being limited by its own body. Same trick a crossbow plays on a human arm. Somewhere along the line, nature invented the crossbow and then gave it legs. Bold. A fighter pilot starts graying out around 9G. A cheetah accelerating flat out pulls about 1. This spider launches at over 130, roughly 100 times the cheetah's number. Your fastest reaction to anything takes about a quarter of a second, and the spider is done in a small fraction of that. The web isn't the thing she throws prey into. The web is the muscle that throws her. Peak speed of 4.2 meters per second, from a dead stop, by an animal you could lose in the crease of your palm. The Net-Spinning Caddisfly. If you've ever flipped a rock in a fast stream, you've had a few hundred of these in your hand and never noticed. Net-spinning caddisfly larvae build a small shelter out of silk, sand grains, and plant fragments, then rig a mesh net across the current beside it, like a windsock made of thread. Whatever the water carries past, the net keeps. It built a net in a river, and then retired, and it tunes the thing. Mesh size varies between species depending on how fast their water runs, and individual larvae make the mesh finer as the current speeds up, which sounds backwards until you realize fast water shoves smaller particles past you faster. A single larva can lay down several yards of silk in a day, and it re-rigs the whole net whenever the flow shifts. In test channels, gravel stitched together with caddisfly silk holds its ground at flows that wash bare gravel straight downstream. These larvae are physically pinning riverbeds in place. Nobody has managed to measure how much of a river's floor is held down by larval silk, and the honest scientific answer right now is a lot. Build the right shape in the right current, and the water does your hunting for you. The Bolas Spider. This is the only animal here that gets its prey to come to it on purpose, at speed, convinced something wonderful is about to happen. The Bolas Spider doesn't build a web at all. She spins one short line, puts a single drop of glue on the end, holds it with a front leg, and waits. That's the whole structure. One thread, one bead. Then she starts lying. From a gland on her abdomen, she releases a chemical copy of a female moth's mating pheromone, and she can switch between as many as 3 versions, depending on which moth species is flying that night. It's catfishing, except the hook is real and it's on a string. Male moths track pheromone plumes upwind for long distances, so she needs no range and no speed, only a convincing forgery. When she feels the wing beats coming, she swings. Despite the name, nothing gets lassoed. No loop, no wrapping. And the ball isn't really the weapon either. The perfume is. Her entire trap is one sticky drop on one thread, and a single, studied female pulled in 204 moths across 100 hunting nights on that alone. Somewhere in there, nature decided the best hunting tool was a lie. Every moth she kills dies flying toward a love letter that no female ever wrote. The Purseweb Spider. In woods across the eastern United States, this thing is built onto tree trunks at about knee height, and it looks so much like a dead root that people lean on it. The red-legged Purseweb Spider builds a sealed silk tube that runs along the ground and then straight up a trunk for around 10 inches, and it lives inside permanently. It's a spider that lives in a sock, and also mends the sock. Here's what makes it work. The tube is anchored only at the top, so the whole thing hangs like a plucked string, and any weight anywhere on it tells the spider that something has arrived and exactly where it's standing. When an insect walks on the outside, the spider sprints up the inside, drives its fangs through the silk wall, and injects venom into an animal that never saw an opening. Then it cuts through the wall, drags the body in, and stitches the hole shut behind it. The prey never finds a door, never finds a gap, and dies anyway, on the outside of a wall to something on the inside. It kills through the wall, and then sews the wall back up, because the trap has to look presentable for the next one. The Humpback Whale. 40 tons of animal, and its hunting strategy is building a wall that fish refuse to swim through even though nothing is there. Bubble net feeding works like this. Humpbacks swim a tight spiral underneath a school of fish, blowing a rising curtain of bubbles as they go. Fish schools react to visual and acoustic boundaries, not physical ones, so that curtain reads as solid, and the school packs tighter instead of scattering. Then, the whales come up through the middle with their mouths open, and a diffuse cloud of prey becomes one mouthful. And most people assume this is instinct. It isn't. A study tracking Canadian Pacific humpbacks estimated that close to 60% of first-time bubble netting could be explained by social transmission, whale to whale, with immigrants carrying the technique into groups that didn't have it. Scientists are watching a fishing tip go viral among 40-ton mammals. A humpback runs about 50 feet, longer than a school bus. The net it exhales can spread wider than a basketball court is long, and it's made of air the whale was already carrying. Nothing solid is holding those fish in place. A wall of nothing is. The biggest hunting structure any animal on Earth builds isn't a web or a burrow. It's 100 feet of bubbles that lasts about 15 seconds. The Trapdoor Spider. The door isn't camouflaged. The door is invisible. Soil, silk, and bits of plant get worked into the outer face until the seam disappears, and the lid opens from underneath, on a hinge, in a fraction of a second. Radiating out from the entrance are trip lines, and those lines are the real innovation, because a door on its own only catches whatever happens to step on it. The trip lines push the trigger zone well past the rim, so the spider knows the direction and distance of a footstep before it opens anything. Door up, grab. Door down. Females may never leave the burrow they dug as spiderlings, which is 4 decades in a studio apartment with 1 door and no windows. The previous record holder for spider longevity was a 28-year-old tarantula. Then, researchers in Western Australia followed a female they called number 16, first tagged as a spiderling in 1974, and still sitting in the same burrow in 2016. 43 years. And she didn't die of old age. A parasitic wasp punched through her lid. 43 years, 1 hole, 1 door, and she never once went out looking for a meal. Patience isn't a personality trait out here. It's a construction material. The Bobbit Worm. On a tropical reef flat, all you can see is 5 short antennas sticking out of the sand, each about the width of fishing line. Everything else is underneath. The Bobbit Worm builds a permanent burrow in soft sediment, reinforces the walls, and leaves nothing exposed but those sensors, which read the vibration of passing fish, crustaceans, and squid. When something walks into range, the worm fires a muscular pharynx up out of the sand, carrying jaws shaped like serrated scissors. Only the front end moves, which is why the strike is shorter than the prey's reaction time. The longest verified specimen measured just under 10 feet, taller than anyone you have ever met, and nearly all of that stays underground in a hole about as wide as a pencil. It withdraws down that hole at over 20 feet per second, dragging the fish with it. So, 10 feet of worm in your reef with scissors. Fine. And we know these burrows are engineered rather than random, because there's a fossil version. A trace fossil from Taiwan named Panicnus formosi preserves the same burrow shape from roughly 20 million years ago, drag marks included. We have the fossil and the drag marks, and still nobody has filmed the full strike in the wild at a speed that shows what actually happens. The Allomerus Ant. This is where the trap stops being a structure and starts being organized. Not one animal building something, a whole colony. On a plant called Hirtella physophora in the Amazon, workers of Allomerus marticulatus shave the hairs off its stems and bind them into a flat platform. Then they grow a fungus through the fibers, and the threads knit it all into a spongy mat strong enough to bear weight. The platform is riddled with small holes, and under every hole sits a worker with its jaws open, waiting. When a grasshopper or a butterfly lands on top, ants grab its legs and antenna through the holes all at once and hold it spread-eagled until it can be taken apart. The fungus in there isn't mold, and it isn't an accident. Turns out they cultivate it on purpose, as a binder. These ants are farming rebar. Each worker is a couple of millimeters long, and the prey they pin down can outweigh an individual ant by orders of magnitude. Proportionally, it's a crowd of people reaching up through a grating to hold a horse still by the ankles. No single ant has a weapon that matters. What matters is the surface, because a perforated deck turns a colony's numbers into dozens of grip points at once. They didn't build a weapon. They built a predator, and then moved in. It took a plant, a fungus, and a few thousand ants, and not one of them could have caught a grasshopper alone. If you made it all the way here, I post new animal deep dives like this every week, so hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.